Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we're talking with Mike Molinet, co-founder of Thena.ai. Thena is helping modernize business communications over messaging platforms. Mike, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only because of your extensive experience building Branch for the last 9 years, which obviously I want to dive into that and kind of that whole journey, but also thinking about how AI is getting involved in a lot of different ways companies are not necessarily replacing products, but creating kind of operational efficiencies using and leveraging technology. So super exciting to see how you're doing that with Thena and dive into that and that whole kind of ecosystem that you're building there. But before we get into that, what were you doing before you started the company?
So before we started Thena, I was working on Branch. Before we started Branch, I worked on a few different projects with my co-founders. And even before that, had been working as an engineer for about 5 years, mechanical engineer specifically out of undergrad, and tried to start a few small businesses on the side while working as an engineer, which is where I originally got my kind of entrepreneurial bug and decided that I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial and not work for somebody else. Moved out to Silicon Valley in 2012. And that's when I started working on more projects and ended up meeting my co-founders, which eventually led to Branch and then later eventually led to Thena.
And how are you? Obviously, it sounds like kind of one of many founder journeys, but one thing in particular about your journey is how did you kind of go through and identify problems in the world that you were looking to solve? Obviously, from what I've learned about Branch, it was a problem that you had saw building companies prior to that. But yeah, how were you kind of gaining the experience and connecting with other founders to get ideas? How are you searching for problems in the world that you wanted to solve?
Yeah, I think everyone's path is a little bit different, but I'm a big believer that you're identifying problems really usually or often needs to come from a pain point that you've experienced yourself. Now, that can be challenging or a bit of a trap if you are experiencing the same pain point as millions of other people, because then millions of other people or thousands of other people might have had the same idea as you, which is why I think you see certain consumer products that tend to replicate or be very similar to other ones. But for us, it was really about just diving in head first. And so with my Branch co-founders, our first idea was nothing to do with Branch. Branch is a mobile linking and measurement platform, basically for apps, that we started in 2014. But our first project that we worked on was very different. It was hardware. It was Fitbit for dogs. So it was a kind of a smart dog collar to help track your dog's activity and location. And was it the world's perfect idea, most perfect idea? No, it wasn't. It wasn't a big market opportunity. It was going to be hard to manufacture and get distribution. But what it did was it led us down the path of starting something. And then 3 months later, we decided we're going to pivot. What we learned from that, Paw Print was the name of the smart dog collar. We learned that actually we work well together as founders, but that we wanted to be in something more software based because we found the problems with scaling something hardware. People can do it. It's doable. But we found that we were more intrigued by how can we scale software? And at that time in 2013, we asked ourselves like, okay, what are the software trends? And one of the big trend, maybe not surprisingly back then, was mobile apps, right? And this is 10 years ago, but even then it was still obvious that mobile apps were growing like crazy and that they were going to overtake desktop someday. They eventually did. And so we said, let's latch onto that. We don't know what we want to do, but we want to be in the mobile ecosystem. And so we decided to work on a consumer facing mobile app. And that was kind of like that first step into mobile. We worked on that for a year. It was a photo bookmaking app, basically photo sharing app. But during that year, we identified all the problems with respect to mobile app routing and linking and measurement and attribution, like all these challenges that hadn't been solved in 2013. And we're just getting more and more complex. And one day we stepped back and asked ourselves, do we want to spend the next 10 years working on this mobile app? And then the answer is kind of like, no, not really. We don't think this is ever going to be a big business. So then we said, what do we know about these problems that we've faced trying to grow our own mobile app? That there might be something behind. And as we started to list the problems around user experience and routing and links breaking and being able to track where our users came from, we started to realize, oh, there's a nugget of an idea here that is actually really interesting that nobody has solved, that we are uniquely positioned to solve because of our unique knowledge that other people had, but it was a smaller segment of the population that had uncovered this knowledge because only a few fewer people had developed apps at that time.
Yeah.
And so we said, maybe there's something there. And so we identified that problem based on our struggles trying to grow our own app organically for a year. And that's where we ended up going down the path of branch. And so all that to say that the big lesson there is you are probably not going to come up with the perfect idea just sitting in your house or your apartment, just theorizing on what are the problems in the world. You kind of have to experience them. And the more you can experience, the more context you can build to identify unique and novel problems and then solutions. So we never would have landed on Branch had we not worked on a mobile app for a year. We never would have landed on that app had we not started working on Fitbit for dogs. And so where we started was very different than where we ended, but we needed to start somewhere. And so one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to founders or aspiring founders is just start somewhere. Your first idea is not going to probably be it, but it'll start you down that path where then you might uncover something really interesting. That's like the biggest thing when it comes to identifying problems that you might want to solve.
Yeah. And also it's interesting thinking about obviously betting on application and the growth of just mobile apps. And what in particular just was new about how quickly and readily they can get to consumers that was just not seen before. What was, would that kind of benefit the adoption of Branch eventually?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like I say this often, but one of my favorite lines from my Branch co-founder, Alex, is he said something along the lines of like, I want to be working in an industry that even if we fail, we face plant into a pile of cash. And what he meant was, yeah, it's a good one. And what he meant was latch onto an industry that as that industry rises and grows, it's going to lift everyone up, right? And even if you like falter, you're probably still going to be successful. And that was huge because what we did was we latched on to the mobile app ecosystem. Now, part of that was a bet, right? There were plenty of people in 2013, 2014 saying apps are going away. It's all going to be mobile websites. And like, yeah, there was that bet. And so there's a little bit of platform risk, but our belief was apps are better and will continue to be better. And they're going to continue to be a thing. And and mobile in general is going to increase in popularity. And it's going to spread and then that will overtake desktop. And there's going to be enough problems there that we will figure something out. And so that was like the biggest thing. We latched ourselves onto something that was going to be so big that even if we failed along the way, we would eventually find some niche that would still be valuable. And I think that was like one of the most compelling things and one of the benefits that we took advantage of in 2014, getting into the mobile space. It's that's like one of my biggest pieces of advice as well, which is latch yourself onto an industry that's going to be huge because you could execute perfectly in like a slow or stagnant industry. And there's not going to be much opportunity for growth.
I mean, at the time too, I mean, going into mobile, I mean, with 2013, you said, I mean, I'm just thinking about like, at the time when I was in 2012, 2013, that was when a lot of like Angry Birds and all those really high velocity like consumer apps were really jumping off and seeing crazy traction. And I'm just thinking, was it just like a timing of people who were building mobile apps just didn't see that much of that pain until you built and integrated it? Because I can see like now it's a standard to be able to link through to different ads, whether it's an advertisement or you're embedding something for your own product. It's almost like the evolution of landing pages and how sophisticated that is now, right? Was it just like because we were building at that right time, you just caught the problem right before everybody saw it?
I think that was part of it. I think to some degree we created a bit of more of a market around it just by being there. But I think it was largely around, it was the time that if you were in it and if you'd been in it for a year or two, you kind of knew the problems. Yeah. But it was also, people had been it was one of those things, it's probably some cognitive bias, but where you become accustomed to the problem. So you don't think about looking for solutions or trying to solve it yourself. And the only reason we did was because we stepped back and we asked ourselves explicitly, do we want to work on this app for 10 years? The answer was no. And then we asked ourselves explicitly, what do we know are challenges in the mobile app ecosystem that we might be able to solve or that we suffered from? And so it was very early. Now, also Alex, my co-founder, he'd started working on a similar product like a year before that, actually. Really? Coincidentally. That was like kind of a weekend project, didn't go anywhere. Then we worked on other stuff and we eventually came back to that same idea. So
Yeah.
Like there was always that nugget of an idea that he'd identified pretty early on. I think even in 2012, possibly when he was
Yeah.
working on it as well. It's like that was there, and then it came down to the execution. I think in 2012 it might have been a bit early.
Yeah.
2014, I think the timing was a little bit better. We were still early. And this is one of the challenges with the being a founder in kind of the startup ecosystem, where if you're too early and then enough of the market or early adopters are not there, you'll die. You'll run out
Yeah.
of runway. You'll die before you can get there. If you're too
Yeah.
late, then it's already been solved by enough companies. You're going to be a late entrant and it's going to be harder to compete. And so like the right area that we've seen, at least with Branch, and I think also with Thena, is you want to be early enough that you question like, crap, are we too early? But there's enough people there that want to use it, that early adopters, the 10% of the market that are early adopters, that want to grab on that and want to use it. And so if you can, that's why it partially comes down to timing. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to be
Yeah.
too late, but you also don't want to be too early, because being too early can be deadly as well.
Right. And just thinking about like, what do you think? Well, I mean, a big thing I could see in terms of changes it made to mobile applications was really catering to like this partnership model that we now see today, where certain apps are partnered with certain other brands that are similar in association or within this ecosystem. Obviously, now you see that expanded into Web3, but I mean, did you see the potential of how the impact of having just like better tracking of the links through your system would impact businesses and partnerships and create this whole kind of ecosystem now that we can track all these measurable outcomes? Did you see that, or did that just come about as you were building?
A little bit of both. So I think we saw that opportunity where because we tried to do it ourselves. We tried to do like affiliate partnerships with our mobile app and tried to do a few other things. And we're like, man, we can't, like, we're getting all these users, but we can't tell where they're coming from. And so we can't go, for example, double down on the channels or the affiliates or whatever that are working best for us. And so that was kind of like one of those nuggets of, there's a problem here that nobody's solved. Why has nobody solved this? But more generally, there's one of the kind of higher level themes that you're hitting on, which is there was new opportunities that emerged over the years, over the last 9-10 years, that we never would have been able to identify. And this is an interesting thing because one of my Thena co-founders said, like, the TAM, the total addressable market, is a factor of the founders. And I do believe that to some degree, because yes, you need to be in a big market and have a big TAM, but where the company is 5, 7, 10 years down the road is often going to be very different. And there's often going to be new opportunities that emerge that were not and never would have been obvious in the beginning. And nobody could have found in the beginning. And so part of that's luck, but part of that is identifying those opportunities when they're nascent and then capitalizing on them over time. Because there are plenty of things, whether it's products we built, things we sold, opportunities to grow in Branch's history, where we never would have in 2014 imagined that would have been the world was going to go. But when it did, we said, oh, great, we have a solution for this. That's why I'm a big fan. Anytime there's a disruption of any kind, right? A lot of people look at disruption and they say, oh my God, this is scary. Maybe it's going to bring down our company or hurt our sales. We look at those disruptions, whether it be from Apple or Google on the Branch side, or some of the things we've done on the Thena side. We look at those disruptions as opportunities, not as disruptions, because those opportunities usually create some new problem that then if we're positioned to go solve it, we can solve it and then usually sell it.
Yeah. What's also fascinating too, because within that kind of chaos, there are companies like Branch, from my perspective or my opinion, is like building this pipeline, right? This infrastructural piece that most are going to be used, if not standardize the experience. And you see that now with like a lot of Web3 companies, or just like the past few years, kind of creating this infrastructural layer. And obviously that'll evolve in its own way. But interesting, and shifting gears into Thena, now there's this big AI play. And how does this kind of get involved in our businesses, and how all businesses are thinking about it as a productivity tool and how to engage with it? But there's not a lot of infrastructure or foundation kind of, I guess, that people can kind of come back to in terms of like a first principle standpoint. And so like, I'm curious, what made you go in this direction in this new kind of open market? What was attractive about AI, and what got you involved? Was it another problem that you were seeing at Branch, or was it something else out in the world?
Yeah. So coincidentally, it was a problem that we were seeing. And so we started Thena was started, call it early 2022. before the big like AI revolution and ChatGPT were publicly available, et cetera. But really the problem goes back a few years. And so just for the listeners' benefit, Thena is ultimately a layer that sits on top of Slack and Teams to enable companies that service their customers on Slack or Teams to be able to service them more efficiently. And so part of that is just being able to track when customers ask questions or have issues, being able to automatically understand that using AI, like, hey, this is an issue, this is a bug report, this is some sort of feature request, be able to track it, create a ticket, and then also be able to automatically do things using AI, whether it be automatically alerts, use sentiment to inform customer health, or auto respond to the customer that asked the question, because you don't need a human doing a lot of those things. You don't need a human adding tags, setting urgency, replying to the customer with a link to your knowledge base. A lot of that can be done via AI, right? And so as we started to scale serving our customers on Slack at Branch, it was definitely a high engagement channel that I loved, but it was really hard. It was hard to scale. It was hard because it was really noisy, and it was hard because customers kind of expected a fast response. But if you're relying on humans to respond to all of your customer queries on Slack, it can be really overwhelming. And so we started to build a couple different things, but over the last year, we've really built it out into a platform where you can engage with prospects or customers within Slack, within Teams, and you can have auto responses. You can automatically track and detect what are the customer's issues, problems. You can see those trends over time. You can see over the past 90 days, we have started to see an increase in the number of bug reports from these types of companies. And so I think for us, we're really trying to solve two things. One, we wanted to solve this idea of servicing more and more customers in the place where they wanted to be. So if they wanted to be in Slack, we wanted to enable that. What was preventing us from enabling that, what was preventing us from having more customers serviced in Slack, was the heavy nature of doing it in Slack with humans. And so you still need humans engaged, but if you can free up a customer success manager's time or support engineer's time or a solutions architect's time to not have to respond to basic queries and instead do more strategic work, that's a win-win for everybody. Customer gets their answer in the platform that they want to work out of. CSM or sales engineer or solutions architect doesn't need to be bothered with kind of lower level questions, but they can spend more time interacting and building relationships with the customer in a more thoughtful and fruitful way. So that's kind of like what led to the idea originally for Thena.
Yeah, and thank you for giving us some context. And I'm curious because when I was thinking about the company and doing some research on it, it's different from Branch in the way that, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, in the way that you kind of rely on Slack and that Slack is this big kind of ecosystem, this big pool where that it's almost like a self-feeding funnel, and it has already this reputation amongst customer engagement. So it's like you both live and become super fruitful with Slack and its growth, or die with maybe if it becomes not adopted as much. And how has that difference kind of changed how you build Thena versus how you built Branch, being that you're relying on kind of another partner in that way?
Yeah. So definitely building Thena in a different way. I think building a company 10 years later, some things are the same and some things are different. And I think one of the ways in which things are different is when we started Branch and even the prior company, there wasn't like Slack was very, very, very new. And so it wasn't necessarily a common channel that people used, even internally, right? Most things were still done in email. And throughout my Branch history, a lot of things were still done on email. When I look at the way in which we interact on Slack or at Thena, almost everything's done in Slack.
Yeah.
And then docs like Google Docs, Notion, et cetera. And it's interesting because all of our selling, all of our support, all of our customer engagement, it's all done on Slack. We don't send email newsletters. We don't service our customers. We don't even have a support email alias. If you need support, you can use our chat, or you can come see us in Slack and we'll service you in Slack. It's just a different world, right? And granted, we're a little bit more at the forefront of that, but we believe that's where the trend is going more generally, for better or worse. Because it's definitely, Slack can be chaotic and Slack can be or it can be a real benefit, but it can also create a lot of challenges, which is ultimately what we're trying to solve with Thena, right? Like take advantage of the benefits without suffering through the problems or the challenges.
And how much is like, I don't know if this is like founder question, but like how much of this is an experiment for just understanding how AI can kind of manage these overall challenges that customer engagement teams face or customer success teams face? How much of this is like the initial experiment for a grander idea of its relationship with these teams?
Yeah, definitely an experiment. I think we all generally see where AI is going to take us, but there's a lot of unknowns. And the All In podcast, they were saying a couple weeks ago, they're like, this is the dust storm right now. Everything AI related is a dust storm. And it's impossible to know what direction you're facing, where things are going to land, who are going to be the players that come out on top. And so everyone's just kind of in a flurry of activity, but it'll start to take shape over the coming quarters and years. But I do view a lot of what we're doing as kind of an experiment, as I think most people are, right? Because we just don't know. We don't know where the world's going to go. We don't know how it's going to be received. We don't know a lot. And so definitely an experiment. But that's where I think, especially in startup world, fast iteration and being able to experiment, being able to learn quickly and then change course as you learn is such a crucial skill.
Yeah.
And it's like this weird dichotomy where you need to be both doggedly persistent on what it is you're trying to achieve, but at the same time flexible to be able to pivot on a moment's notice based on something you learn. And I know it's always a weird dichotomy, right? Because like you're trying to do both, and it can be very easy to say, no, I believe this is the way we should go, and stick with that for 4 years, only to pick your head up and realize you were way off course.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but if you're constantly changing direction and constantly
Make no
moving
progress.
next, you're not going to be persistent enough to ultimately achieve success. And that's where the nuance is as like a founder or as an entrepreneur, being able to determine what is that thing that you need to be overall persistent with, but what are the things where you need to adapt and flex real time.
Yeah. You're thinking about Thena and what you've kind of been able to accomplish so far. What's been exciting about the traction you've seen up to this point, and what's exciting for the next milestones you're looking to achieve with the company?
Yeah, I think, when we started working on it, it was originally just, I was at Branch, the people that would eventually become my co-founders they'd left Branch and they were working on something and this was it. Right. And I was like, oh man, we need this today. And I think what's exciting is to see that there's other people out there that have the same philosophy, see the future, share that vision, and are suffering from the same problems that we can solve. And then B, being able to solve it and then get such good reaction. It's funny because I've worked on now 8 different businesses and 6 of them I would say failed, right?
Yeah.
And there were multiple times in some of those where you're just like, okay, we built this thing that we thought was, or we think is amazing.
Yeah.
And then you go try to talk to people and they just don't buy it or they don't adopt it, or maybe a few do, but it's a small percentage. And then you start to realize, oh, there's not a market opportunity here. And that really comes down to product market fit, right? Like how good is your product relative to what the market needs and how is that fit? And it's really exciting to have this because it feels similar to Branch in the sense that we have good indicators of product market fit. I think it's early, right? Like it still takes time. It takes years to really understand true product market fit. But that's what's really exciting about kind of today's position, where we feel like we've built something that solves a need, not only for ourselves, but for thousands of other companies out there. And I think what's exciting about the future and where we're going is we believe we're just tapping into the early adopters. We believe right now we're early. And so that is maybe 10% of the market out there that might be interested in our solution. We believe we should be able to, over the next 5 or 10 years, get to 50% of the market will be in a position where they would want something like Thena. There's always going to be the laggards and the late adopters, the people that will never use a solution like this for whatever reason, whether it's because they don't believe in messaging platforms, whether it's because they don't want to use third-party tools, whatever it is. But I believe that we're just tapping the initial early adopters, which is great because it's a good sign that, assuming that trend continues, that there should be a big market opportunity ahead of us over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And do you think it is the big problem is companies just having more customers to kind of service, and there's just more problems that there's not problems, but just variables that aren't considered within somebody using within the user experience? Like, is it a volume thing that's creating this kind of almost like bottleneck of service and support that just like challenging to overcome this mass amount of tickets?
Yeah, I think it's a few different things. I think definitely more customers, whether it be like long tail customers, individual end users, or enterprise customers. That's one. I think another is there's more noise and there's more channels, meaning historically, let's say you only had one channel. Customers could only contact you via email. Okay, you could build a system, but now they can contact you via email, via LinkedIn, via Slack or Teams, via phone, whatever it is, right? Then they hit you up on Twitter, right? And so like there's just more noise in general and there's a lot more channels. That starts to become chaotic. And then finally, I think people are expected to do more, right? Like everyone, like companies are always pushing the limits of how can we do more? How can we do more? How can we do more? And when you look at employees, it's okay, this person's doing a lot. How do we make them more efficient? How do we ease some of the burden on them? So maybe they can output more, but without needing to increase the input. And that ultimately is what determines productivity. So I think if you can, especially as salaries continue to rise, cool, let's pay you more salary, but we need to increase the productivity, not by working more, putting more in more hours, but by increasing the output. And how do you do that? You do that through better tools, better systems, better software that can use things like AI to make somebody significantly more productive, to free up their time to do other things that can't be replaced with AI and with other software.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, whether it's internal or external, are some of the biggest risks that the company faces today?
Biggest risk. I think there's always kind of execution risk is one, right? Do you execute well? Do you hire the right people? Do you build the right product, et cetera? The other is macroeconomic risk for sure. Just it's a tight environment. I think that's a really good thing. I think there's a positive aspect to that, but it does make it challenging to sell. The environment was very frothy in 2021 and even the years before that, right? But we're in a very different environment where deals are taking significantly longer. They're getting much more scrutiny and they're closing at lower amounts.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge for sure. I think it's good. I think it's healthy, but I think it's a challenge. And then one of the other risks too is AI. Who knows what the heck AI, what's going to happen with AI over the next year? It's moving so fast. It's impossible to predict, which is why it's just a dust storm, right? Like you cannot tell what's going to land tomorrow or next week or next month. And so there's definitely some opportunity for big, massive disruption that none of us see. And I don't think that's an existential risk. I think it will create opportunity for the right companies that are able to lean into that, but it is a risk to some degree.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the long-term bets that you're taking right now in terms of, is it AI is becoming going to be widely adopted as the product tool that every team is going to use, or is it customers are going to have increasingly high volumes of new kind of problems and tickets that they're going to resolve? What kind of bets are you taking right now?
Yeah, I think it's two bets or two kind of theses that we're operating under. AI definitely is going to take over as a bigger and bigger component of the things that people do. And then the other is just more generally that the way in which businesses are communicating, including B2B communication, business to business communication, is shifting more and more towards messaging platforms. Slack, Teams, Discord, whatever, WhatsApp, business, whatever it may be, right? And it's shifting away from email. Email's been around for 25, 30 years for a lot of people, and it's been a method for communication. But what we're seeing is simply that is shifting more and more towards messaging platforms. And so we're just going to be there. We're going to be there ready to enable all those companies as more and more shifts to messaging. We're going to be there to help solve the problems that come with that.
Yeah. I love this next section. I call my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions and we'll see where we get. First question I always like to open up is, what's particularly hard about your job day to day?
What's hard? I think for me, maybe today, or at least what's top of mind right now, is the volume of different things that you're doing and context switching and being able to context switch quickly, be able to dive in deep and then pull back out, and to go from a customer call to an interview to a podcast, back to a customer call, to a prospect sale, to an investor meeting, like all within a 3-hour block. It could be a lot. So that's kind of like that context switching, rapid fire context switching.
Yeah. What do you think strengthens that ability for a founder? Is it understanding your story, your product more, delivering a pitch? How can founders kind of be more prepared to take that context switching and be multi-dynamic with the different responsibilities that come with being a founder?
No, I think it's practice. I don't have a good answer for that. Practice. I've been doing it for 10 years and it's hard. I'm able to do it, but I had 16 meetings yesterday I think I've got like 14 today. So it can pile up, but I think just practice, you just get better at it. And as much as you can, carve out a little bit of space in between meetings if possible. That's hard to do usually, but if you can do it, it's very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thinking about kind of your experience as a founder, what's something that you are good at now that you wish you were better at earlier on in your career?
I think understanding people. I think at the end of the day, we're like every startup, or maybe not every startup, but most startup founders, at the end of the day, you're in a people business, right? And unless you're doing deep, deep tech, and I would argue that OpenAI is a little bit more in the deep tech realm, but a
Yeah.
lot of businesses are not. A lot of businesses are, you are selling. You are selling to investors, you're selling to prospects, you're selling to candidates to come join your company. You're selling to partners to integrate with you. So like you're constantly selling. And I think for me, I was an engineer. I was an engineer by trade, mechanical engineer. Everything worked very logically in my
Yeah.
mind. Everything should be an equation. Everything should be rational. The problem is humans are messy. Humans are complex. Humans are not rational and humans are emotional. And I think the more and more I understood about humans and how they interact and what their biases are and what they're motivated by, then I started to realize, oh, I can change or pivot my approach to satisfy maybe an illogical or emotional response, but one in which that lands me ultimately at the place that I want to go. And I think I wish I understood that bit about people more
Yeah.
earlier in my career, and then B, kind of started to adapt to that new environment, that new mindset, and learn more of those skills. Human psychology is so fascinating. And if you're a founder, you're selling. I don't care what role you're in, you're selling. It just depends on who you're selling to.
Yeah. Everyone at every moment in time, I feel day to day. And then, so in terms of like, one thing I'm really curious about as AI grows and expands is, and obviously a huge development of AI was a lot of research done on like learning models and ways that it kind of goes through and kind of uses laws and logic to be able to progress and build upon itself. But I'm just wondering how much of like philosophy is going to now be incorporated in a lot of the development of these types of products in terms of like moral thinking and because I feel like a lot of the concern about where the technology goes crazy is just like understanding the framework in which it should play. Is that like a crazy like suspicion or are we kind of like, yeah, are we chicken little or is it an actual kind of concern we should think about?
I don't have the answer to that, but what my feeling is, I think it's a legitimate concern, and I think it's a concern that
Sure.
a lot of people have, which is why it's so prevalent in the news right now, at least, because I think there's a lot of people that feel that this thing that we don't fully understand has been unleashed on the world, and once it's out of the box, you can't get it back in. And now we need to kind of reactively figure out how do we
Yeah.
set some sort of constraints around it. Possibly, do we not? And I think that's a big worry. I don't have a strong opinion of it. I'm a bit along for the ride, and we're going to adapt to things as they develop, but I don't have a strong opinion on it because I would argue I'm very uninformed relative to the people that are actually working in this day to day.
Yeah. 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 Always like to ask this question because I love how founders extract knowledge out of anything that they ingest, whether it's books or people. What's been extremely impactful earlier or currently in your career that's kind of taken you or lasted or kind of cemented in your mind, something that other founders can take away from or extract knowledge from?
Okay, yeah. So I think earlier in my career and while I was running Branch, a lot of it was books. And originally I was like high volume book. I was just like, okay, yeah, if I could read a book a week. And I think my mindset has shifted on books at least, which is it's not about the volume that you consume, whether it be Audible or physical books, but rather about how much you put into practice. Because you could read
Yeah.
10 books, 5 books, 2 books, but if you execute or put into practice a lot of what you've read, assuming that they're good books, that's much more impactful than being somebody that says like, yeah, I read 100 books this year. I'm like, yeah, but
Yeah.
what did you, how did that change? Right. And then that was a big component of my learning and growth at Branch. And then what I've been trying to do more recently, it's hard, which is why I end up with a ton of meetings, but I'm trying to spend more time with other founders. I didn't do that at Branch. I
Yeah.
just was so inwardly focused. And so I've been trying to do now, second time around, is spend more time with other founders. A, because I think sometimes I can help them in certain ways. And then B, which is kind of like having that community and being able to
Yeah.
bounce ideas off and understand that you're not the only one suffering from a certain issue or a problem can be really beneficial. So trying to leverage more of my network and community and build more of that network, which is something I didn't do with Branch. So I think books or other like fellow founders, other community. And then usually the question is like, how do you meet those people? Frankly, I think LinkedIn is one hugely unutilized, untapped resource for a lot of people. A lot of people that I'm friends with now or that are fellow founders that I chat with occasionally, I met them, a lot of them through LinkedIn
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we're chatting about different things, posting on each other's, comment on each other's posts, whatever it is. So big fan of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's awesome to kind of stay engaged, but also keep fostering that ecosystem or network. And a lot of it's just like staying in touch and engaging with like content or even asking for advice or a conversation once in a while, which is super cool and very underutilized. But those who know, it seems like it continues to kind of feed in the ecosystem, especially now that, and actually that's another question for you, being that like teams are remote and we're kind of dealt with this remote world now. What are you as a founder doing to like keep your team engaged and kind of keep that kind of productivity in line with the direction of where the company is going, but also knowing that like you can't offer everyone everything anymore, like space and all those like I think about I used to work out of a WeWork, like right when they began, we had like beer on tap and kind of those crazy days, but it was about offering that like all in one ecosystem. How do you do that as a founder now with a remote team?
It's hard. It is really hard. And transparently, we are more of an in-office team. Even though I'm at home right now, it's because we're moving offices, but we are more of an in-office company. And we have 3 different locations, Bay Area, New York, and India. We have a couple people that are remote, but for the most part, everyone's in office. And it is because especially at this stage, sub 50 employees, it is so hard to really build that camaraderie and build that trust and operate effectively and efficiently when everyone's remote. Now you can do it and there's other benefits to that. But for us, our belief and our philosophy is we're more in person than we are
Yeah.
remote. I think as you grow, as a company gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you can do more of the remote thing. But I personally am, and a lot of the people that we've hired are much more motivated being around other people and
Yeah.
prefer to operate in office.
Yeah. What sets it up so that you don't, as a founder, you're not spending a lot of time like going through values all the time? And because obviously there's just different priorities, especially at the velocity you need to move at. What have you kind of, there's something you can put in place that other founders can to kind of almost automatically reinstill that? Is it like communication standards? Is it documents that talk about principles? Yeah, just curious if you've thought about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to align in the very beginning, especially as founders, like what are our principles and values? Maybe write them down. Those are going to change over time. You're going to iterate and learn of what's
Yeah.
actually important and what isn't. But I think what's interesting, we spent a lot of time at Branch doing this, but I think it was increasingly important as we got bigger. So we got to 100 employees, 200 employees, 500 employees. That's when it became increasingly important to really reiterate a lot of stuff. When you're
Yeah.
10, 20, 30 employees and you're mostly working out of 1 or 2 offices, everyone can see it and feel it every single day. And they see and feel the founders and they sit right next to you and they're in the meetings with you. But as you become, as a founder, at least as your company grows, you become more and more removed from maybe the day-to-day of everyone else at the company. Some people will never meet you in person in today's environment, right? And so you do need to do more of that communication, both written and verbal. And you need to basically repeat the highest level of information that you want everyone to know. You need to repeat it 1,000 times. Your
Yeah.
job almost becomes just like being that megaphone and just
Yeah.
repeating over and over and over again, the top priorities, the top KPIs, and the principles and values of the company.
Yeah.
Now there's other things you do to make sure that, you have value stewards and that you hire the right people in the company and your recruiting process, make sure to screen for the right values and principles. But I think that becomes more important as you get bigger.
Yeah.
In the beginning, like we don't spend really any time talking about values and principles simply because we're all so well aligned and we're all operating around each other that it just kind of is inherent in the way in which we operate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And it's awesome going through this show and talking to a bunch of founders that you can kind of see what founders can do to create kind of really a foundational business at the genesis of the idea so that long term you don't find issues that arise. But also at this point, it seems like you have a pretty amazing core team to where you've worked well enough together that you're kind of in the same direction, which is awesome to see. But Mike, I know we're coming to the end of the episode here. So before we give you a chance to give us your plugs, is there any question I didn't ask you that I should have? Anything that we didn't bring up that we left on the table here today?
Ooh, good one. Let's see. No, let's leave it at that. I think we left it on a good note.
Awesome. Mike, it's been such a pleasure talking about your early years at Branch and really what got you there, your entrepreneurial journey, and what guided you to building the companies you did and this next venture and how the bets you're taking are really exciting of the productivity that companies can have, servicing customers, leveraging existing technology. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. I hope you enjoyed yourself and thanks again for being on Behind Company Lines.
Of course. Thank you.
Of course.